Hey guys, welcome back to Coming Clean. Today I have a very special guest with me, someone I've wanted to have on for a really long time, who actually was going to record with me last week and then it didn't work out. Come to find out we needed that to happen so that we could have a deeper conversation and just kind of, I think, let go of the nerves that automatically come with sitting down and recording a podcast. So here we are, still with a little bit of nerves. But I wanted Sheila to come on because actually Sheila started as an avid podcast listener. And I opened a message from you last April, I think it was. And the message was very long. And it was a great way to start because I had to get used to those really long messages, which I absolutely loved. And I received messages pretty often, but this message was different because you were so genuinely interested in the podcast that you had been listening to, and you had this tremendous feedback. And not that I don't love feedback that's like, oh, hey, I listened to your podcast and it added value to me, but instead you put like bullet points of what value it added to you and what questions you thought of afterward and like all these things and all this feedback of like ideas that I could go further with, and I was just blown away. And I felt like I could feel you in your message. And I remember saying that back to you, like, wow, like, thank you for this, you know, because I could feel your personality. And that was the beginning of our friendship. And ever since, we've been having those long paragraph conversations, but in real life and through text and messages. But after a while, I just felt like I wanted to share you with whoever I can, because you have a really tremendous sense of self-awareness, and you have a really unique way of expressing that through your words, that often brings new awareness to me, that I'm like, wow, I never thought of it like that, or I never realized that I could be, you know, I could go that deep. And you've brought out a new level of myself, which I'm really grateful for. And when I look back, I told you this recently, that the day before you messaged me, I had written in my journal that I wanted to manifest authentic, deep, conscious female relationships. And then you sent me a message the next day. So, I mean, I know that we both kind of have that trust in the universe to provide us with whatever it is that we need. And I think the beginning of our relationship was a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
So, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It's really crazy because I sent you that message with such detail because I didn't want to do it myself. You know, I didn't want to have the platform or the responsibility to share my thoughts, but I could give feedback and thoughts all day. So this is a challenge and a stretch for me, but something that I'm really grateful for and happy to be on the podcast doing. So thank you.
Yeah. And with that said, I think it's interesting too, because I find it so easy. I mean, I still get nervous to record and things like that, but I always feel like when I experience something, I want to share it out to absolutely everyone, and I have no restriction, I guess, and sometimes that could get me in trouble because I maybe overshare sometimes. But I was so, like, I guess, surprised by your sense of resistance around sharing, because I just thought, like, what do you mean? Like, you have all these ideas, you have all these thoughts, you've done all this reading and researching and listening, and you have so much value to give. And I'm so glad that you have set an intention for this year, literally, to start speaking and to really and kind of, I guess, elaborate on that. Like, why did you choose the word speak for this year, and what does that mean to you?
Yeah. So I chose the word speak this year kind of as an intention. I never set resolutions. I set intentions, or just things that I want to kind of remind myself of throughout the year. And this year, it's like you can only take awareness of ideas or education or resources or people that you follow or ideas that you have so far unless you start actually living it. And I'm at that point where if if I don't start sharing, be it through writing or through connecting with more people or doing something that would drastically change, a career or something down the road, I feel like I'm just dying on the inside a little bit. And I think that I always was really good at speaking to whomever I needed in whatever situation I needed. Like, I could chameleon, and if I needed to talk business, I can talk business. If I needed to shoot the shit and have small talk, no problem. But when it came to really getting raw and sharing myself and my story, I would always clam up, or I would only do it one-on-one, and I would only do it if I felt that it was giving value to someone else. And the problem for me with having ideas and you even acknowledging me and saying, oh my gosh, I'm so surprised and you have this depth, I roll my eyes and I go, no, I don't. I'm not special. I don't have this or that. But the truth is that every single one of us has a thing that's innate. Every single one of us. And for me, it's just been that ability to just dive deep real fast. And my family didn't understand, and friends didn't understand, and I didn't understand. So I spent many, many years just being quiet or just speaking when I needed to. And having a very rich internal life, very introspective and journaling and all of that, but never sharing. So that's why this year I have to speak, because I'm going to die if I don't. That's what it feels like. So that answers the question.
Yeah. And it seems like someone might be well, that's super harsh. You feel you're dying inside if you don't speak. But I can completely relate. I mean, it's not unexpressed feelings, unexpressed creativity, unexpressed value, or just thoughts are not benign. They eat away at you, and they literally will make you sick.
Yeah. And I was thinking about, this conversation and what I wanted to talk about, and purposefully not trying to think too much, because I will overthink to a point of paralysis with decisions or with action, with courage, with any changes, because it's safe. And then I always feel upset with myself because I know what's possible within me. I can feel it. And then to put a lid on it constantly feels like the air is taken out of my, being. But when I was thinking about coming here, one message that I really wanted to communicate, with you, is this notion of just being a passive participant to your life versus this, or a passive observer versus a active participant to your life. And what I mean by that is, so much of my life, and I'm sure many others out there, we just kind of exist within this framework, and we just perform these roles, and we just act, and we make decisions on the means of I have to, or it makes sense, or this is the next step, or we slip into survival, or just whatever. And the next thing you know, you wake up 5, 10, 15 years later, and everything's fine. Nothing probably is that traumatic. But you are, as an individual, this immense expression, unique expression of this creative capacity, and whether you want to call it God or universe, I don't care what you call it, it doesn't matter. But you're this unique thing, container, that only you can perform and act or say or speak or do these certain things. So when we passively just go through life, we shut that off. And it's we don't know how to become active participants because we don't know how to make decisions. And we don't know how to make decisions because we don't know who we are at an identity, true level. And I was thinking about this, that me, even to you, a month ago was well, I don't know how to find my purpose. What is my purpose? I have all these ideas I want to write, or maybe I want to do a podcast, or maybe I want to do a documentary. I actually really want to do that. I've never picked up a camera. I don't know why I want to do it. We have all these things, and it's what's my purpose? Where do I put my energy? And then I thought about it, and I was my purpose is the same as every single other person's purpose in the entire world, and that is literally to just live, and to be. Your purpose is just to be rooted right now with whatever you're doing, whatever culture, wherever you are in the world, your socioeconomic, your cultural, religious, it doesn't matter. Like, your purpose is to live and to breathe. Your mission, however, is where you as this living, breathing thing get to act and do and live in worlds. Like, that's your mission, and that looks different for everybody. And we get so stuck on that. Like, I want to write a book. I want to write a book. I got to do this. I got to do this. I got to do that. And then it's like you don't do anything because it's overwhelming. But it's not that the task itself is overwhelming. It's you don't necessarily believe that you're fit to do it. And it goes back to that core identity of, well, at the end of the day, if I didn't do anything and if I failed at everything, I still exist for a reason, and I'm still purposeful, and I'm still, like, breathing and living. So that's a bit convoluted, and everything that I say is probably going to be convoluted and all over the place because, like, it's kind of how my mind works. But, yeah, so there's this difference between a purpose and a mission, and there's a huge difference between just living your life and actually choosing, like making conscious, aware decision-making that propels you into that mission. So, yeah.
I love you
Off the rail. There we go.
I love how you lean back and you're like, this is the moment, Kylie, you're supposed to cut me off and ask me questions. No, I love it. I love it. This is why I love hanging out with you, because we've talked about it before. Like, it's almost like you tap into this flow state, and I've been there before as well. And that's the beauty of speaking your truth, is because you don't have to know exactly what you're going to say or why you're going to say it. You just start to feel into what is true for yourself, and then it starts to flow from you. And as you're talking, I feel it, and I have goosebumps because every time I don't feel like Sheila is like talking at me. I feel like your truth is coming through, and it's a truth that I resonate with. And that's what truth is. It's like something that you feel that is deep within you, and you're like, yes, yeah, I get that. So that is honestly like the essence of you and the essence of a beautiful conversation, and that's the value I hope people listening get from you, is just you're not telling them anything. I don't think, right, the way that I talked about Eckhart too, you're not telling them things that they don't already know. You're reminding them of truths that they know deep within that they maybe forgot and they need to be reminded of.
Yeah, and when I say that so much of our problem lies with not understanding our identity, you don't have to be taught your identity. It's literally, it's so deep within you, and it's all around you, and it's everything and nothing all at once. And it's just, you have to just, it's annoying. Like, I'm annoyed when people tell me to take breaths. Like, I get annoyed even when I first listen and you're like, take the deepest breath that you did all day. Because it was hard for me, because it forced me to, like, jolt out of, the 18 things that I had to do and the 17 things that I'm mad that I did earlier, It forces you into the present moment, and that's annoying, and that's difficult. And I've always been a cynic, like, or just even sarcastic almost, and it's like this protective measure around me, like, roll my eyes, or like, really, do you have to just be so positive, or do you have to just believe in that way? And like, no, you don't have to, but if you want to tap into like the greatness that already exists, then like, yeah, you got to get comfortable, and you have to get uncomfortable, and just kind of look at yourself, really look at yourself, and not in a critical eye, like look at yourself and, oh, if I could just eat better, or, work out more, or heal this relationship, or, change my career, or be a better mother. Like, all of those things are important, but they are all secondary to looking inward and just asking, like, what is in me that makes me great? Like, why am I here? And what powers have I covered from years and years and years of trauma, or because people told me that that was silly, or that wasn't practical, or whatever? What do I need to uncover and unbury from myself so I can start having enough confidence and a foundation to then live my life? Because so often we don't like going internal. We like, when we have a problem, myself included, to talk to everybody around us, because that's easier. And there's a lot of power that comes in community and support, like, no doubt about that. But if you begin to rely on that to a point where because you don't want to go inward, then it's always going to be just a little bit slower. Your growth is still going to happen. It's going to happen. We are on like an exponential growth pattern. It's just to what degree do you want to link up and join with and realize that you can control this growth, or let it happen to you and then respond to the inevitable growth that you'll go through from your experiences.
So let's talk about that. At what point in your life did you either choose, or were you forced into your personal growth, do you feel? Or what multiple points in your life?
So everything has always been an internal compass, like this guiding compass that I didn't have the awareness to articulate that that's what was getting me from traumatic event to traumatic event to traumatic event. Like, because the beginning part of my life was interesting, I guess is the best way to say it. And for those that know me, like, I've shared a little bit, but my life has always been very much lived internally one way and lived externally another. I grew up with this structure of a family unit that was very odd. I had two loving parents that didn't love each other, so it just didn't work out. And my mother was very mentally ill and sick, and so she loved me tremendously. And I have a great mom. I have an amazing mother. But she, because of her own issues, wasn't able to mother me, wasn't able to parent me in the way that I needed beyond my everyday needs. And I think that from a very early age, my self-awareness and my perception with just how I can read rooms and people and just that emotional intelligence, I guess, I learned really quick. When do you speak? When do you not speak? What can I do to control my environment? How can I protect myself? How can I take care of myself? How can I protect my mother? How can I keep my dad from not getting mad? So I just grew up managing emotions of everyone around me, which caused me then to become very self-aware, because I always had to be on top of my game so I could understand how to navigate. And then that shut off a little bit. All of that awareness and all of that emotional intelligence shut off for about 4 years. Because as a little girl, my mom made the choice to send me to a mental institution for me, not her, but me, because I was acting out and kind of, it's really hard to describe because I don't know what was happening. But I was just acting out, or I was saying weird things like, I don't like living, or, I'm 6, 7, 8 years old, and I'm saying these very confusing things that are reminiscent of almost like a suicidal thought, or just very depressed things, very deep, very dark, very traumatic energy that I didn't know where it was coming from necessarily. And my mom wasn't able to parent me through that because she wasn't strong, enough at that time for herself. The solution was to go behind my dad's back. They were divorced at the time, or separating, and she put me in a mental institution, and I got stuck there for 4 months, and I didn't need to be there. It was not supposed to be there. But she put me there, and they put me on medication that now they don't let anybody who's under 25 have, because it so drastically affects your brain chemistry and alters your mind as an adult, but as an 8-year-old or a 7-year-old, it does even more. And then I lost my memory through that experience. I lost my ability to cope. I lost my ability to understand. I lost that emotional intelligence because I was just thrown into this really weird place, and it's like I blacked out. So whether it was post-traumatic stress or whatever, I spent the next 4 years just in a fog, in a haze, and just not understanding, and just having been out and talking to my family after, I'll learn about vacations that we'll go on, or that we went on, or I'll learn about moves that we have taken, or to different homes, or events that I should remember, and I just completely don't remember at all. So then going into adolescence, that kind of set me up with this thing of confusion of just like, who am I? Where do I belong? What happened to me? Am I crazy? Like, was I supposed to go into that place? Am I unwell? Am I going to do it again? So then the self-awareness kind of kicked back in when I started obsessing over, am I okay? Am I going to be like my mom? Is this my fate? Is this my destiny? And am I insane? Did I belong there? Because not only did I go in once as a child, but it's like Stockholm syndrome. So I went in once and got stuck for those 4 months. And then I don't remember this, but I got out and I was radically different on the other side of this, so I'm told by my parents. Just way more aggressive, way more disruptive, defiant, obsessive, compulsive almost. The thoughts that my mom thought I had prior to going in that were depression or suicide, well, now they were real. Because when I was in there, that was the environment that I was around. So I learned, like, I have flashbacks of like legit kids going into a room in a straitjacket, and I'm like this kid that doesn't have these problems, that literally was left there, that didn't know why. And then so when I got out, it felt weird. I tried to go back to school and my friends are like, where'd you go? I'm like, I don't know where I went. So I went back out of my own request, like that same year. And then I think my dad like wised up to this and like was able to control custody at that point and like, whatever, and got me out, so it was less traumatic. But seriously, I lived my whole life from that moment one step from being normal and one like little inch away from being crazy. And I was terrified because I already had such an active mind prior, during, and after. So every single thing was like exacerbated in my mind. Like if I had a tic, if I like touched a doorknob twice, be like, oh, here we go. Like, here we go. Or if I had a thought, like when you start thinking about what you're thinking, which is consciousness in itself, I still struggle with this today. Like I think about my thoughts and I hear like that ego mind, and then I get scared. I'm like, holy shit, am I schizophrenic? Because then I start hearing all these different voices, not true voices in your head, but like personalities and streams of consciousness and all of that. And I get scared. Like I get truly scared. So that kind of set me up for adolescence. And it was not easy, like trying to do that. And I don't think anyone knew that internal battle was going on, because from an early age of managing everyone's emotions and conflict, and I learned really quick how to make sure everybody knew that I was okay and everything was okay. Like, that's what I'm talking about, like this internal strength that you don't know that you have. The fact that like I could get through that and then like navigate the after effects of what that did to my family and me, and then whatever, and then managing and understanding my mother like with this illness, and then my dad who was like, what the hell is going on? And he like worked a lot to kind of just take care of his own needs and all of that. And then when he got remarried and my stepmom entered the picture, that threw another thing, because it was like this another parental figure that I didn't know how to understand, and I just had to manage everything all the time. Yeah, I forgot where I was going with that, but by the time adolescence hit, I was a master, like, chameleon, like, for sure. I could ebb and flow with the best of them. I could scale up, scale down. Like, I could understand many aspects of every single situation. And now I'm grateful because it super prepared me for, like, the types of conversations and things that I'll have today, I think, to be able to just not hold attachment to the experiences that happened to me, but see the symbolic meanings and the lessons that come from them. I do that now, and I like to do that with other people to help them be like, yeah, but this really effed up thing happened. I'm like, girl, I feel you. Like, let's work it through, you know, because my story's mine. We sat in the women's retreat, and you've shared this before, and I was in that group where Beth, who was on this podcast a few episodes, was in, and all these people with cancer and domestic violence, and clearly we know Beth's story, and like daddy issues that are deep, and all of these different things. I'm like, we're the same. Like, I'm not special, you're not special, your story's not special, my story's not special, but together, like, we need to share these stories so we can, one, like, get it out of our head and stop getting addicted to the way that it feels, but two, share it because we go through these experiences in part to help others, like, arrive at the next level of consciousness for themselves. So, jumping just quickly, because I know you wanted me to share just a little bit of, like, the story, but
all of it.
So then when like 8th grade hit, my dad moved me out of my home in Nebraska, which is where I am originally from, and he moved me in a series of 3 moves my 8th grade year, which as a 13-year-old was just fabulous, because who likes to go through new things at 13, especially when they're self-obsessed and like in their head already and hyper aware? It was very difficult, and I didn't talk to him for like 12 months, and he said it was one of the saddest times of his life because he just felt helpless because I was so rebellious, you know, but it's okay. We got through it. But he moved me a few times, and then I ended up landing in Roscoe area, and that was hard. I did not grow up in a community like Roscoe. I felt like a fish out of water. Like, even though I was white and I like had the same culture or whatever as so many people that were in that community that all seemed kind of like the same, I felt just like an outsider. I had gone to parochial school, so Catholic school, my whole life, and suddenly like I was now in public school, and I was always like bullied and didn't really have friends, and was just, I was popular, but like I was odd. Like, I was odd, you know, and I felt a need to be popular, so I felt those oddities and those eccentricities like heightened. So then when I got into high school, I just like completely changed my personality again. So no one ever knew about any of the mental stuff or the hospital or like all of the fear and the shame and all of those things. Like, no one knew that, and they didn't for a very long time, like probably until I was, I don't know, well into high school, and I shared it with like a couple people. But I just kind of completely shut off my self-awareness again there, and then started acting like as any high school student does, like I gotta fit in, I gotta do this, and I gotta do that, and then that's what I'm talking about, being a passive like person in your life. You just go through the flow, and we all do when we're that age, like it's fine. And then I had to make the decision to go to college, so I went back to Nebraska and did my whole college thing there, and then everything was going great. It was about to like have this next chapter of my life, and then my dad died super unexpectedly when I was 22. So then that was like another like jolt that was like, what? You know, because he was like my everything. Like, he was my savior. He was my primary parent in terms of emotional support. And my mother, who may or may not be listening to this, I'm not sure. She knows I'm going to talk about this because I asked her permission to talk about it, because I don't want to paint her as a bad person. I don't hold her responsible. I have no unforgiveness toward her at all for this entire childhood situation. But when my dad died, that was really, really hard, because he was my everything, you know, and I had this enmeshed relationship with him where I looked to him as this sounding board. Like, if he said I was doing okay, like I was doing okay. So then when I graduated college, that's when you have to make all those decisions. Like, not only am I like still on his insurance or his cell phone, or like how the hell do I do taxes, but it's like way bigger than that, because it's like I was about to, you know, like start this career, and now I completely just exploded like again, and was like, okay. And I had to again take on this role of like very task oriented. I had to be the emotional like control center for everybody around me, because they couldn't. I didn't really grieve. I didn't really do anything. I just kind of lived for a year and just like handled all of the stuff that came with the process of losing a parent or anything unexpectedly. And then about a year into his death, I was just like, I don't know who I am, and I don't have family. I have blood family here, but I feel no connection. I feel like I'm eating and sleeping and going to work, and that whole adage of like, we just exist to pay bills and die, like I was feeling it, like I was living it. So I was like, where did I feel the best? And I ran back to Illinois because I have a best friend here. And I just was like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, and can I just live with you? And I was like, I'm only going to be here a year. And I did live with her, and she took me under, and she and a couple of other things brought me, nourished me, like back to this place of decision making again. And I'm here still, and it's 4.5 years later, and I'm not thrilled about it, if I'm being honest. However, it's okay. And I remember about a year into me being here with her, she said, do you think you'll ever be happy again? And that cut me like so deep. And she didn't mean anything by it, but it was that moment of life pushing me and saying like, what are you doing? Like, you don't have to feel this way. You don't have to keep living in your past. You don't have to keep reliving these traumas. Like, there's a different way if you want to. And around that time, I had kind of reconnected with an old friend, and he started showing me resources that kind of spoke to higher levels of like consciousness, be it books or just like little, I don't know, resources like podcasts or snippets or whatever. And I was already doing my own kind of like soul searching and seeking and all of that. But when I started to get an influx of those materials that kind of forced me to look at my spiritual beliefs and the foundation for which I look at life and present moment thinking and all of that, it kind of just planted a seed, and then it's just propelled since that point. But I'm definitely skipping over things because I'm off track again. So I'm going to let you rein me in, but that's an overview, I guess, of some of like those like moments that were defining and helping me develop my self-awareness. Self-awareness came from me from necessity, from an innate being that I never got truly connected from or off. A lot of us kind of we're all born with this innate connection to the source energy or God or whatever, and then every year it slowly dwindles by our societal, structures. Age 7, like that's important. A switch kind of goes off, and mine never totally went off, but I didn't have anyone to speak it with or to as an only child, also that was parenting my parents, and then all of those other events that happened. So self-awareness came from necessity, innateness, and then like lack, I guess. Mm-hmm. It's my home. It's like my protection. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So everything you just said, basically the first time we ever met in person, you told me everything you just said. Mm-hmm. And I was, one, really inspired by your vulnerability and your strength. And I was also just blown away by your story. I mean, you sat in front of me and you sit in front of me today so self-aware, so strong, and not looking at yourself as a victim. And to me, that is the most beautiful thing you could ever do in your life. Because like you said, we all have things that happen throughout our life.
Yeah, for sure.
And we're all the same, mm-hmm. meaning we cannot compare our traumas because they're ours.
That was the biggest piece of advice I ever got when my dad died, is like I didn't want to grieve because I felt like it wasn't worthy of grieving, which is so crazy because that's my dad. Like that was my everything at that moment, But I was like, well, my mom and my dad could have died. It's not that bad. So that I'm happy that you brought that up, because anyone who's experiencing grief in any capacity, no one has to die. You could be grieving a relationship. You could be grieving the end of a career. You could be grieving a phase of your life. It is valid, and it is not something that you should feel guilty about. Like, grieve away. I mean, don't make it a pillar in your story that, like, you go back to when you want to feel, like, victimized or justified, but also give it enough time to understand its significance in your life and, like, tuck it away, and it has a place, is my point. And it'll look different for everybody.
Yeah, that's so important, though, to say. And I know we talked about wanting to talk about that topic. Like, victimhood, you know, is so much different than giving validity to your grieving process. And I love that you made that distinction, because it is true. Like, you can be sad, you can have any types of feelings that you want. They are valid, they are yours. But if you keep returning to something that no longer serves you just because it's familiar, then it no longer serves you.
Yeah, and it's really, really hard to not do that, because I remember when I couldn't cry, and I do this even recently. If I can't cry, or if I feel like stuck emotionally, I go back. And I'm not saying this is healthy, I'm just saying I do it. And I, like, think about those traumatic moments to try and force me to feel something. Like, even now, being self-aware and feeling all the feels. Like, some days I don't feel any feel, and I still feel like I'm floating around, like, tethered to this cord in, like, outer space, like, hanging by a thread, honestly. And I'll go back to those moments sometimes to remind myself that, one, I overcame them, but honestly, if I'm being honest, just to feel shitty sometimes. So we do that, and it's something that I want to do less of, because it's really not healthy. But about that whole victimhood versus, like, validating, you know, like, your circumstances or whatever, I really, really struggled with wanting to look at this particular area of healing that I'm in the process of doing right now, which is, like, looking at my inner child. Because in my mind, I'm like, no, if I go back and obsess over getting thrown into a mental institute, then I'm going to just, like, get stuck there, and I'm gonna, like, you know, like, what's the point of going back, like, if I'm trying to be forward, you know, like, go forward. And someone told me, like, if a relationship is in, you know, the back of you for a reason, like, it's for a purpose, you know. So, like, you have all these adages, like, you can't look back if you want to go forward. Well, honestly, if your inability to go forward is partially because of your unresolved, buried numbness from your past, like, yeah, like, you gotta go back for a second, you know, and you have to do it wisely, and, like, grab a friend to do it with. You don't have to go to a counselor. Grab a podcast. Like, I'm not doing this with a counselor because I don't want to pay for it, because I don't feel that I want to invest in myself enough yet. Maybe one day I will. But 2, there's so many resources out there for me to start getting my brain at least ticking and turning and going. So right now, I'm really, like, annoyed and uncomfortable because I'm looking at my inner child and kind of, like, the archetypes of your inner child and just the archetypes of our life. And for those that aren't familiar, like I wasn't, you know, 2 weeks ago, archetypes are kind of just like these personality clusters that kind of are the predominant stories or characters in our life that are there to protect us but also hold us back. And there's so many. And I'm reading a book right now that's really forcing me to go back and look at how these characters of my childhood, or these different, like, facets of me as a child at 7 or 6 or 5 or whatever, have drastically affected me today. And I don't get stuck on that, like I said, but here's the problem that I'm facing right now in my present moment. I can't make decisions. I struggle with courage, like, bad. I know everything I need to do, and I can sit here and speak it to whomever. But when it comes to me, I'm like, and I know what I need to do. But a lot of times it's like I do everything except it. I distract myself. I'm busy. I'm this and that. And I've only made headway by going back just a bit and, like, feeling into those feelings of those years that I don't remember and those trauma points that I blocked out. And you don't have to have amnesia to do this. I mean, you could have a really intense relationship that you block out and then like go back and be like, okay, I'm going to feel this for a second so I can like let it go.
So can you talk about really tangibly, what does that look like when you say go back? Like, is it journaling? Is it meditation? Is it dance? What does that look like for you?
It's been all of those things. For me, a lot of times I will listen to a resource, be it a podcast, or I will read a book. And it will get me going. It'll get me thinking. And then I will journal. A lot of times they say that you need to handwrite because there's a mind-body connection when you actually handwrite your journal prompts. I don't do that because my hand hurts. And as you said, I don't know how to be brief. So I write paragraphs. And, you know, all the technology and typing, that just doesn't work anymore for me. So I type. And I'll start asking myself questions. So a perfect example, if I'm going to try to remember this and then stop talking about this specific thing, but I sent you a while back. I was looking at kind of my current relationships and understanding the role that like our parents and our childhood have in developing our relationships. This is much deeper than daddy issues or mommy issues, by the way. A lot of times we will look for aspects of our parents in our current relationships. And my current relationship, I think about it, I'm like, there's none of my parents in this relationship. I'm so confused. What do you mean? Well, then I looked at it from a different angle and I started asking myself these questions. I went for every caregiver I had primary. So my mom, my dad, and my stepmom. And I said, what negative emotions or roles did they exhibit in my life? And I listed them for each. And I focused on the negative because our parents are people too. So a lot of times we think our parents are heroes or they're villains and they're nothing in between, but they're people. So I think about like my dad, for example, and what was exhibited to me. Well, like discipline, like work ethic, perfectionism. Like my dad was a really successful mortgage loan officer that worked like 80 hours a week and provided for his family and all of that. But you know what he wanted to do? He wanted to be a freaking like mentor, like a teacher for children, like in business. And he thought about it, and I heard him time and time and time again say, oh, it's too late, it's not practical, I don't have enough money, I'm too old. So that is what I'm talking about. Those are the things I wrote down. Like you did it with your money blueprint. Mm-hmm. What was modeled to me about money? Well, for me, I'm like, what was modeled to me about life? And I did it with my dad, my mom, and my stepmom. And then as I did that, I saw my personality come off of the page. So all of the times that I told you at the beginning of this conversation where I spent so much time editing and controlling and putting the pieces together and keeping the peace, it was really just me attaching my identity to those statements that were being, conveyed to me. So then what I did when I went through and I got my collection, I realized my personality, both the strengths of my personality, but also the shadow aspects of my personality. Then I looked at my relationship and I was like, oh, okay, I see this. I see why this isn't working. Or I see why this is working. Like, self-reflection happens by a willingness to just go back unedited. You just have to be really raw, and you just have to ask yourself those difficult questions. That's how it works for me, and then I speak it through journal, and then if it's impactful enough, I'll share it with someone, like my best friend or with you, or well, really that's it at this point, Mm-hmm. But for other people, it's dance, it's art, it's anything that takes you out of your trauma, yourself, your icky, and just lets you flow. That is how you go back. You just flow. One thing that was really impactful for me is one day I was trying to meditate, which I don't enjoy meditating, but I was laying there, and all of a sudden, I was awake, but I had almost this vision, like a picture, like a mind's eye picture, and it came through, and it happens a lot for me. I see a lot in my mind's eye. And I saw what to me represented like God or like Jesus, because that's my frame of reference. Culturally, how I hit the microphone, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Culturally, how I was raised, that was my spiritual, like that was my foundation. You know, its sense like went all over the place. However, I was laying there and I was having this moment where I felt like I wanted to cry and I wanted to meditate, but I couldn't. And all of a sudden, I saw this like image in my mind, and it was just like this prompting to like follow. So I literally was home alone, feeling ridiculous in my living room, and I felt like I needed to follow this image. And so I did. I just like felt like I needed to change my room, so I did. And then I just kind of sat and I stood, or I guess I was standing, and the lights were off and the door was shut and it was locked because I'm like trying to put a million barriers because I feel so vulnerable. I kicked my cat out. And then all of a sudden I felt this like internal dialogue begin within me of like, you need to dance right now. Like, you can't be still, you can't go deep because you need to dance. Like, so then I was like, hell no. Like, and then this weird like image that my mind constructed kind of unveiled to me, and I saw this like room where all these people were dancing. I was like, I can't join. Like, I don't want to join. And it felt like I was not in Earth. It felt like otherworldly, or like another realm where these people were all there from all these different walks of life and whatever, and they were all just like there and like totally content and cool and chill, and I'm feeling so restricted and so just like meh. And then so finally like this being kind of came over, and I felt like literally he just like took off this imaginary like weight off of me, and you're just like, I'll take that. You don't have to take that. Like, you just have to be. You don't have to do. You don't have to think. You don't have to try. You just have to be. So then when he did, or I'm saying he, but you could use whatever pronoun. Like I said, I don't care. I felt that washing over of just like love. And it's not like this was my awakening moment. This happens a lot. It's accessible to all of us, by the way. I am not special. But in that moment, I was able to like take a big breath, and I did dance. And I did for about 3 minutes or so. Weird interpretive dance. I don't even remember if there was music. It was weird. And then all of a sudden, I felt like an interruption in my thought of this voice again, not my imagination, but a voice. And it was like, you can go meditate now. And I did. And it was infinitely better. So like, heed yourself, you know? Heed your own knowingness, because you know what you need. You can follow the things that you so graciously share, but that can be a start. All of it is just a start. Every book you pick up, every podcast, every like self-help conference you go to, every church service, start there, but take it inward and apply it to yourself. You know yourself better than anybody else, so you know what you need. It's a lie when you say, I don't even know what to do right now. And I'm sorry if that sounds harsh, but I've said it like every day of my life. Like, seriously, I think I said it today. But it's not true. That's like safety. That's your brain trying to protect you. You do know what to do. You just have to trust that you can. You have everything that you need. It is so deep inside of you. And it's like just bored, honestly. Like, it's bored. It wants to just kind of come out and be like, you should do this, or you could do this, or try thinking about this. A perfect example of like these serendipitous moments that happen. I wanted to read 3 new books. I had identified that I wanted to read them, but I didn't want to pay for them because I am very frugal. I'm like, I'm not paying $20 for this book. I go to a thrift store just because I like thrift stores. All 3 of them are right there. Like, it's wow, and it's something that is exciting and awesome, but what I'm trying to get people to understand is that it doesn't have to be unique to me or to another person, and it doesn't have to be special. Like, the level to which you expect greatness in your everyday life is kind of the level to which it will happen. And it's not just like the law of attraction, I guess a little bit, but it's so much more than that. It's just, are you worthy of this cool resource that you want? And I get it, like, circumstances are hard. Like, we have moms in this group, we have people that have lost children, we have people that have been abused, we have addicts. Like, mental illness, anxiety, I feel it. I am so there, and I don't want to discredit anybody's painful moment. But just if you can grab a hold of the inner strength that no one can give to you, you didn't earn, it can't be taken away, it's always there, and it's just whether you want to remember it or not.
Amen. Amen. Yeah, this is why I wanted you on. I don't have to say anything.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I hope I talked about something.
You talked about everything. I didn't look at my sheet once, and
oh man,
I know that we covered everything on it, and that's why I love talking to you. There needs to be no control or planning.
Yeah.
So let's get tangible.
Yes.
To give some tools, some tips to people listening, and then I just want to ask you a couple of fun, light questions.
Good, yeah.
And then we'll wrap it up.
Sounds good.
Okay. So if you could, what one book would you gift to everybody listening?
So currently right now, I'd have to go with the one I'm reading right now, and it's called Sacred Contracts, and it's helping me understand the archetypes. So a different way to go back to inner child-like stuff that manifest as adult personalities that seem like they're ingrained within us, but actually they're not. So it just gives a bunch of tangible tips for how to identify kind of these characters that are in your life and what it looks like and how you can learn to work with them and not against them. There's a bunch of stuff about spirituality. So if you are wondering how Christianity and Buddhism and like all of these different Hindu things work together, and which is a whole nother thing that we should talk about someday, is spirituality. It really gives a nice historical, objective, not emotional overview of just all of these different world religions and how they work together, and how they all arrive to this thing that I told you, is that you already are what you need, and there's nothing you can add to that. You just have to remember. So beautiful. I don't remember the author, but we can link in notes.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got this podcast thing down. Look at you. Awesome. Well, I'm going to have to, maybe we can exchange books, and I can borrow that sometime.
Yeah. And one more. I don't even remember what its content was, but it's the thing that propelled me in 2018 with this like journey. And it's called The Gifts of Imperfections, and it's by Brené Brown. And I've gifted it to a few people, and that one is way less deep and philosophical and way more tangible, and probably one that might be easier if people are just jumping in. It has to deal with guilt and shame and how to release yourself of guilt and shame so you can have this wholehearted experience in life.
I love that.
Which is actually probably the one that I should have said.
Well,
but both are super good.
Yeah, because like you said, there's two different levels.
Yeah.
Because someone might be listening and maybe they already read that book, and maybe they're like, I want to go deep, like real deep. And then maybe someone's just starting out, so the Brené Brown might be a better start for them.
And that one's really good. Anything by her is inspirational and applicable to today. So
yeah, awesome. Okay, so in this new year, what is one thing that you'd like to do more of? And then what's one thing you'd like to come clean of?
One thing I want to do more of is obviously speak, but I want to really figure out how to like harness courage and actually make some decisions that truly cater to me and not everyone else around me. So that is really important. And something I want to come clean of is self-editing. I have a tendency still to like chameleon myself and to adapt my personality to different groups and different settings. And I am so damn tired of like compartmentalized living. Like I can't handle it anymore. So I really just want to be one whole Sheila all the time to anyone, unashamed. So I have a lot of work to do in that area, but it's okay.
Yeah. That's a beautiful intention.
Yeah.
That I can relate to. I mean, I feel myself doing it every time I press record, you know? It's like I'm going to be my most authentic self as I possibly can, but there's always this sense of like, what's someone thinking while I'm speaking? Am I saying the right thing?
Yeah,
am I saying too much?
Like there were areas as I was speaking in our podcast that I was like, what am I saying? But, you know, you just have to be nice to yourself and, like, dip back in when you can and be fine. And then also coming clean of thinking that I have to control. Because at the end of the day, like, everything is already there. Like, I am, period. If that makes sense.
It does.
I am, period. Even if I'm not, I am.
Yep.
So that's... Eckhart Tolle, I suppose, could help for those that are, like, wondering. Which, by the way, Oprah Super Soul podcast, every Monday she's doing one-on-one with Eckhart Tolle, going over his book, A New Earth, which is pretty complex, but they're kind of taking it, like, topic or chapters and just exploring it in a much easier manner.
Oh, really? So that's starting?
Yeah, it started. Oh. There's one episode that happened on Monday. So for anybody that's like, who's this Eckhart guy and what is going on with the ego and I can't read this book, I'm going to go to sleep, try the podcast. Yeah, so it's a little easier.
Awesome.
I mean, I'm doing that because I'm going to go see him because I was graciously gifted to go see him in April, and I don't feel prepared. I'm like, oh my God, I'm a novice. I don't know what I'm doing. And that's so my ego.
Yeah.
Which is
he would laugh
right
at you.
Yeah, silly.
And that book is a great book, but it is really deep, and you can kind of glaze over.
I've tried to read it, and I felt like a veil went over my eyes. It was about a year or 9 months ago, so I'm gonna pick it up again. And if you're ever like focusing on a topic or a book, and you're just like, it's probably not the time, and that doesn't mean that you're like less spiritual. It just means you have something more pressing to read right now. Or to discover right now.
It's so true.
It'll always be there. It'll always come back around.
And you'll be more receptive to it when you do.
Yeah, for sure.
Agreed. Awesome. I'll link that Super Soul Conversations. I guess one last thing, although this question could definitely open up longer, we'll try to keep it brief. If you could speak to your younger self at any age, you can choose, and give her your current wisdom, what would you say in just one sentence?
You are safe.
Yeah.
Yep. So much fear surrounded my life. Some of it deserved, most of it not. So... safety is so important.
Yep. Love it.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you'd like to share? Any last bits of wisdom you'd like to say for our listeners?
I think I've said more than I can even remember, so I'm okay.
Okay, great. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here.
Having me.
My pleasure. Thank you guys for watching or listening, and we'll see you next time on Coming Clean.